All right. Uh, Good morning, everyone. So I am about to play the closing hearing of the Commission of Inquiry that was appointed to look into the tragic incidents that took place at Paria facilities owned by Paria Fuel Trading Company. This was originally aired on the 23rd of last month, and I know many of you would have missed it. And so I will be playing that for you here this morning. So I'm going to get it started, and you can let me know if you can hear it, if there are any issues, and all that. Okay? Take care.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is a formal closing hearing of the inquiry into the tragic incidents which occurred on the 25th of February of 2022. This is the report that you've all been waiting for. It is, as you can see, quite substantial. We're putting the last final touches on it this afternoon. Accompanying that report is a letter to the President, to which I shall let you in. Dear Madam President, thank you for your forbearance in awaiting the delivery of this report. When you appointed me to take over from retired Judge Mr. Justice Dennis Morrison, KC, on the 6th of July 2022, I did so with equal measure of humility and trepidation. Within a few weeks of reading into the papers, I took the view that this could and should be done within the short time frame that you had imposed, i.e. some 6 months from our first sitting. The first sitting was on the 7th of September of 2022. I apologize for having failed you in that regard, as the burden of the material to be considered burgeoned well beyond what I had anticipated. Today, somewhat later than planned, and that will be tomorrow morning, obviously, I have the honor to present you with this report. Leaving aside any blame, one cannot help but be deeply moved by the tragedy of it all. I, for one, will never forget the words of the 11-year-old Elia Henry. When I got word of my father stuck in a pipe at Paria, I froze to know that, but I prayed and I prayed that my father and his friends will be safe. I went down to Paria with my mother, praying for a miracle. My father and his friends to be free. However, that did not happen. We trust that the government will choose to publish this report promptly, and that it will thereby provide some solace to the stoicism of the victims and their families. It is right that I should single out Christopher Boudram for his undoubted commitment in doing all he could to help his friends and colleagues on that fateful day in the pipeline, and then in coming before us to give his evidence. That was not easy. He is a credit to his family, the people, and the country of Trinidad and Tobago. This report would have been hampered and delayed yet further, but for the commitment to it from the Honourable Stuart Young MP, our resolute Commission Secretary Sarah Sinanan, an extraordinarily capable legal team headed by Ramesh Maharaj, Senior Counsel, and my stalwart Co-Commissioner Gregory Wilson. I save the highest praise for the public, their patience, diligence, and the way they have embraced me in their midst. Thank you all. That is the letter that will accompany this report tomorrow morning to the President. It is as well to remember how this Commission of Inquiry came about. It was unequivocally as a result of public pressure, the desire for you, the public, to have a real attempt at truth, to find out what happened, why it happened, why was so little done to rescue them, and how we can stop this ever happening again. I can say that from correspondence received from all over the world, people are awaiting the outcome of this inquiry. From a human perspective, this inquiry deals with the death of 4 men, the extraordinary escape of 1 man, and the long-term effects on their families. From a commercial diving perspective, the inquiry deals with health and safety and measures for the future. From a business perspective, what went wrong, why, and what needs fixing. Let's be clear, this was no act of God or mere unlucky accident. Leave aside blame for a moment. It is imperative that we all ensure that this never happens again, here or anywhere else. Voluntary dive standards for commercial diving were introduced in Trinidad and Tobago in 1997. There was a valiant attempt by the Trinidad and Tobago Bureau of Standards to revise those standards right into the 2010s. That failed amidst squabbling by some companies with interests of their own to serve. But the fact is, for an industry inherently dangerous in its operations, there are no compulsory standards in this country. And the voluntary standards are routinely ignored, as they were by everyone in this tragedy. We are not at liberty to disclose this report to anyone other than the President. And it's not really for me to argue otherwise. However, this is a public inquiry using public money, involving fatalities. There can be no greater driver to make this document available to the public than those facts. I am convinced that no one wants to see this report gather dust on some dusty shelf in a government office somewhere. It has to see the light of day, and I'm confident that it will. A very substantial commitment has been made to this, not just by me, but by all of the people who've been involved in this inquiry. Rumours of interference with this inquiry have not really abated. And I want to assure you, as I did last time, that there is absolutely no truth in it. I've not spent 40 years of my life as a barrister to be cajoled by some compromised political, commercial, or financial considerations. I believe I was employed as the chairman of this inquiry because the government wanted someone completely independent, untainted, and that is what they've got. This report pulls no punches. It is our honest appraisal of the facts as we see them. It will not sit well with everybody. There may be those who will be disappointed. There may be those who will be outraged. And there may be those who will wish to challenge it. But whatever your reaction, do not forget, we are dealing with Kazim Ali Jr., Rishi Nagasar, Youssef Henry, Faisal Kurban, and their families. And let's not forget Christopher Boudram, for who survival has not been the easiest of things. One feature of this inquiry that has become clear beyond peradventure to anyone who has been watching the inquiry unfold is that throughout the process, at no stage has anyone conceded a single error, a single mishap, or a single recognition of a failure, even with the benefit of hindsight. We understand that there is a desire not to accept liability, lest that should incur responsibility of financial responsibility in some civil suit at some later stage. But these men, as I said already, did not die by accident. What they're left with, and their families are left with, is posturing of the potential parties, perhaps challenging the very findings of this inquiry before they start fighting with each other, each insisting that they got nothing wrong. For all the money that has been expended on the process so far, much more is almost certain to be spent before the families will see a single dime or dollar in compensation for them of any kind. We feel compelled to observe that the victims of this tragedy have very little, if any, help in dealing with the loss, both mentally and financially. We cannot help but think this is something that should have been addressed, if not by the companies involved, then possibly by government. It would have been an act of kindness and human decency to have made some kind of ex gratia payment without accepting any liability at all, and given to them when they need it most. But this, as you will appreciate, is out with our remit. I say it on behalf of Mr. Wilson and myself because we're human. Let me say something about the costs and that any public inquiry incurs. It's never going to be cheap, is it? The breakdown is contained in our report and will be available once the report is made public. The overall costs, which are not quite finalised yet, but we think it's pretty close, is about 15.5 million. Before there is too great an intake of breath, let me put that in some perspective. There have been a number of inquiries in this jurisdiction over recent years, certainly going back over perhaps the last 10 or 15 years. The CLECO inquiry spent 500 million. The Udicot inquiry cost 46 million. The COE inquiry cost 31 million. The Las Ultras inquiry cost 24 million. The ongoing highway inquiry, which has yet to even start, has already incurred a cost of 11 million. We have concluded this inquiry over a relatively short time, not as short as I had wanted, but a relatively short time. And we have done so within what we regard as a not unreasonable benefit of 15.5 or so million. Our report has taken, I suppose, about 16 months, I think, from when I was originally appointed. Of course, the commission was convened before that, but I was not appointed until July. It has sifted through, as I've said previously, tens of thousands of documents, video material, audio material, voluminous correspondence, and transcripts of the evidence. We have been provided all of this material by way of a hard drive, and will do so, to the President, and a hard copy, this document here, of some 380 pages or so. She will receive that, as I say, tomorrow. We've tried to write it in a style that makes it readable, rather than too legalese, but something which, once published, people can genuinely read and digest. We've made a request for the material that provides the basis for the document to remain on a website for the next 12 months. That is a matter entirely, of course, for the government to determine. I have asked for and been provided with a number of questions from different parties in advance, and I deal with them now. We had some questions from Mr. Clint Chan Tak, I hope I've got that correct, from Newsday. And insofar as his questions have not been already dealt with by what I've said this afternoon, they are these. Is the Commission satisfied with the resources provided to it to perform this inquiry? And I can say shortly, yes. In particular, the personnel that have been provided to this inquiry. Secondly, does the Commission believe the parties who appeared before it were as transparent as they should have been or could have been? And I think the answer to that is generally yes, they have. I have found nothing to give us concern that has not at least been made public during the course of the inquiry. So we have no issues or difficulties with any of the material or the persons in front of us. What does the Commission hope will arise following the conclusion of this inquiry? To be blunt, no more deaths, no more injuries. That can only be done if the parties, not just to this inquiry, but who are involved in this kind of enterprise, this kind of business, have a copy of the inquiry. Next, I had some questions from Vanessa Kusi, who is in fact the widow of Rishi Nagasar. She asked this: why a copy of the Commission of Inquiry recommendation final report into the diving tragedy regarding the death of my husband and his colleagues is not being given to me, as well as to other family members? I wish it was in my gift to give it to you, because I would like to do that. It is not within my gift. That is, I'm a matter for your government and your president. The authorities, personnel, etc., did not show any form of care, concern, or compassion. For example, a phone call to find out how we are being able to sustain without our breadwinner, yet it will be handed to them and their associates. The truth won't be given to the families. Well, I can say, first of all, nobody else is going to get the report once it's other than the President and the government. It'll be for them to determine whether to publish it. And they can't give it selectively to people. The law doesn't permit them to do that either. All they can do is to give it to everybody or nobody. And as I've said already, I'm confident they will give it to everybody and publish it. As to the truth won't be given to the families, I can but say we believe that the truth is contained in this document. And if it is published, as it should be, and we expect it to be, you will find the truth there. 21 months ongoing, with $21 million plus is being spent, yet the families get nothing. Therefore, it is the right and wise decision being made. Well, it's not my decision to make whether or not there will be a public inquiry. This public inquiry is called upon, perhaps almost uniquely, by the public themselves. It is the very pressure of the public that has brought about this inquiry, appointed obviously by the government. But I can't say any more about whether you should be compensated other than what I've already said. Nobody, leave aside any personal responsibility that anyone involved in this might feel, but nobody could fail to think that you need to be helped in a situation that develops like this. That's just, as I've said, common decency, isn't it? One might have thought some sort of help would have been given, and I'm sorry that it hasn't been. But it is not within my gift to give it to you. There were some questions from somebody called Anne-Marie Dullal. I hope I pronounce her name right. She is a member of the public. She sent me a number of questions. All of those questions, I'm afraid I can't answer. They're questions about who's responsible, why didn't this happen, why didn't that happen? And they are all questions which we have addressed and are in the document, the report. And then lastly, I've had two more questions from WAC 90 FM, Brehain Lalchan. Question: the Minister of Energy said he was in contact with Paria from Friday the 25th of February and on the 26th had a meeting with families and Paria. How is it he was not asked to testify before the Commission? Well, first of all, I can say we didn't ask him to come because everything we heard from him was uncontroversial. So there was no necessity for him to give evidence. It was, of course, entirely open to anybody else, if they wanted him to give evidence, to call for him. And we would have considered it. But it didn't seem to us to be necessary. Secondly, similarly, the CEO of Heritage got involved from as early as 6 p.m. on Friday and was not called upon to testify, but statements were received from several lower-ranked persons. Can the chairman give an explanation for this as well? Well, what I can say is that Arlene Chow was the then CEO of Heritage. We considered what her involvement was and again did not take the view that she was able to contribute anything of significance to the inquiry. Had we thought so, we would have called for her to give evidence. Her involvement wasn't really from 6 p.m. on the Friday, it was much later than that, at a time when there is no real controversy about what happened. So she wasn't called, but again, as I say, if anybody had wanted her, they could have called her. Those are the questions that we've been asked in advance. I hope that I've dealt with them fairly. It just remains for us to thank everyone once again, and perhaps to recognise two people who, during the course of this inquiry, have been elevated to senior counsel. Mr. Mutu, who was working with Mr. Peterson on behalf of Paria, and our very own Mr. Bissessar, who was working with Mr. Maharaj. They both become senior counsel, and I can entirely understand why they would with their abilities. So I congratulate them, and I wish everybody a pleasant upcoming Christmas break and better news for 2024. Thank you very much indeed.
So that is the closing hearing of the Commission of Inquiry into the tragic incidents that occurred on the 25th of February 2022 at facilities owned by Paria Fuel Trading Company that claimed the lives of the divers. So yeah, the report has been submitted. The chairman is imploring the government to ensure that this report does not collect dust somewhere. And given the fact that the inquiry costs a total of 15.5 million for all things considered, you know, in comparison to other commissions of inquiries, this has been a lot less spent. The chairman is thinking that, you know, the companies involved ought to have provided the families with some kind of ex gratia payment. Of course, it's not within his purview to demand that, but he would have thought that as human beings, those companies would have, you know, understood the circumstances and provided financial support to the families of those lost in this tragic incident. Further to that, the chairman reflected on the letter that he received from Yusuf Henry's daughter, and he said it is something that has moved him till this moment, right? And so we wait to see. We know that the president has confirmed receipt of that, and the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, says that he will not be hiding the report. He will lay it before cabinet and it will be put before the House. He has not given a timeline about when that is going to happen, but rest assured that I will be pressuring government to ensure that report is published in its entirety without omissions. Now, the Prime Minister has committed that not a single thing will be tampered with that report, and so that remains to be seen. So we look forward to seeing that report in its entirety and to getting some kind of justice and taking actions based on the report's recommendations and findings. All right, folks. So, we can naturally have a conversation about these things going forward. But for now, goodbye, and I'm looking forward to getting that report published. Take care.